Okay, so kind of where we left off, I'm going to dim the light so it's a little bit easier to see. But where we left off on Tuesday was we ended up putting in the idle animation and the move animation. And so if you remember, the way that we add these into our character is through this animator controller. And so if I open up the animator controller, so I added my mini idle animation. I'm just going to remove that. So if you remember, kind of the way that the animator works is that we have the state machine that's set up. And so the state, this controls the playback of the animation. So we specify which animation we want in any particular state. And if we want to move from one animation to another, we have to define the transitions to then say move from a idle animation to a move animation. And likewise, if we wanted to move back from one animation to another one, to define those transitions to do that. And so we end up setting up two animations, the idle and the move. If we come back and look at our transitions, the way that we have the transition set up, it's we don't have an exit time associated with it. Does anybody remember why we don't do that? Why would you want an exit time for an animation? How about that?
Because it makes the game flow easier.
Not necessarily the flow. Think about it more in regards to the character. Yes.
Is it so there's time for the animations to play out afterwards?
Yes. So if you had an animation that you wanted to play through before you move to the next one, you would have an exit time kind of associated with it. In this case, for the animations we're doing here, we're just kind of swapping the animations directly. So when we go from a move to a jump, we just want that animation to just start playing immediately. But if you want to have, so for instance, for some of your bonus animations, if you wanted to say you wanted to have the character to emote, so you press a button and the character starts waving, or like what we saw in Donkey Kong playing DS.
Wait, there's a button that you could do that?
Well, I don't think it's set up in the Donkey Kong, but if you wanted to have something set up in your game to do that, and you wanted that animation to play out before moving on to the next thing, you would have some exit time associated with it in order to allow it to play out. So the way that we set up the animator is that we have within the transitions, or I guess really for the transitions, we specify parameters. And so you can think of the parameters as kind of public variables associated with the state machine. And so we can modify these parameters, and then within each state, it's checking to see what the conditions are to then move from one state to the other. So in this case, to go from idle to move, we had it set up where the speed had to be greater than 0.1. And then once we knew that, then it would go ahead and go to the move animation. And likewise, once the speed dropped below 0.1, then we knew that the character was slowing down or coming to a stop. So we got out of the move and went to the idle animation. So we're going to do a new animation. We're going to do one for the jump. And so we're going to use something a little different in the parameters that we haven't done previously. But before we do that, I need to just kind of have a jump animation to use. So in this case, what I'll do, so if I come back and look at kind of my current stack, so instead of making a whole new animation, what I'll do is I'll just create a small animation just based upon the images I already have. And so we already kind of walked through this, and I'll do it just one more time since I now have this recording. So I can create a new clip, and I'm going to call it my jump animation. and save that. Okay, so now the jump animation is set. And so what I want to do is start recording, and now I can set my keyframes and whatever I want to modify on the character. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and add this. So add to the sprite render. Sprite. Okay, so now that's highlighted. So now I'm just going to change. I'm just going to use one of those move. If I can find. I'll just leave it as the sticky because right now we're not using that. So I'll just leave it as that little sticky guy. So I said I'm just going to make it a single frame animation. So it's just going to look like this when the character is jumping in the air. So if I come back to my animator, I now have this jump animation. So since the animator we're using here is tied to our character, it added that jump animation to into our animator's state machine. And so now I need to set it up to have the transitions between different characters, or sorry, between the different states. So I can draw. So to do transition, if you say make, and then you can say make, and then it draws that arrow from one to the other.
I'm guessing you do that same exact thing as you want to do from jump and moving and jumping at the same time?
Yes. So what we can do here is, so I'll go back and set this all up to, because we don't want exit time associated with this. So I'm just going to say no exit time. Let's take all that out. Okay. But now we need to set a condition. So we need to have something to check in order to determine whether or not we're jumping. And so right now, the way that our jump works is that you press a button, either the space bar or the W button, and the character will just immediately jump up in the air. And so if we come back to our parameter list, if we add parameters, so here the different parameters are float, int, bool, and trigger. And so float, this is a decimal value, int's a whole number. Boolean, so this one sounds appealing for a jump because it could be whether or not we're checking the state to see if the character's in the air or on the ground. That could be a way that we tie to it. But the one that we have the most benefit is this trigger. And so what a trigger is that you can think of it as a bool. It's more, or I guess more of like an event than it is a bool. So once the trigger happens, that sends out an event saying this is transpired, so something needs to happen. And so in here, so we're going to set this as our parameter. So we'll say the jump trigger. And so from idle to jump, really the trigger is going to be, or sorry, the condition that we're looking for. We want to see if the jump is happening. And if the jump is happening, then we want to go into our jump animation. And likewise, we'll come back. And for our idle, so here for the idle, because now we want to see if we're in the jump, we now want to see if we're back, if we need to go back to the idle. So in this case, this is where having a grounded parameter makes sense. And so for that, we want to use that Boolean. So we can say grounded. And again, just set this to 0, 0, turn off the exit time. So now we have the same. So now I got to add the condition. So it's going to look. So I'll say grounded. Right now I want ground to be true, so I want to see if it's on the ground. And then that will, once we're on the ground, if we're playing the jump animation, this should go back to the idle. So one thing that I didn't show in class on Tuesday was a way that you can test the animations without having to code up in your script how to set the parameters. So if you remember on Tuesday, we went through the character controller to set the speed, but you don't necessarily have to do that right out of the gate. So if I run the game, so it should come up here. So you can see, we're in the idle animation, and so I want to test to see whether or not my jump is going to work. So if I do the trigger, so now it's playing the jump animation. So the jump animation, it's playing that through at the moment. And so right now, you can see it's still playing. It won't go back. So right now, grounded is set to false, and so that's why we see the jump animation still playing. So if I go back and I manually set the grounded, now it goes back to that. And likewise, if I press jump, so because grounded is still set to true, I can hit this all the time. It's just going to rapidly transition back. So it gives you at least it lets you at least try things out. So like I said, for making sure that some animations will play under the conditions that you're looking for, you'll do that. But probably what we need to do now is get the jump and grounded parameter tied into our character controller script, such that now we can see it actually playing out in the game. So I'm going to go ahead. And one thing I want to do too, and just like in the inspector, so the values that you see in the inspector on the right-hand side for the components, these are the default values. That same idea applies here within the animator. And so because our character starts on the ground, we want to make sure we want to start off with grounded being to true. And so we can set that in code, but it's also nice just to kind of set it here for our own sanity, kind of let us know, this is kind of the starting conditions for the character. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the character controller script. So here, so we want to, so there's the two values that we're trying to set. It's the grounded variable and that jump trigger. So the jump trigger, we're just checking it whenever a player hits the jump button. And so here, we check to see whether or not the button is pressed down. But really, probably what makes sense, if we go into the move, so down here in move, this is where we're doing the jump. So we want to see, so we check to see if the character's on the ground and if the jump has been pressed. And so in this case, it adds the force. For those who are doing the double jump through this method, we're incrementing this jump counter. But I'll just go ahead and say, whoops. So our variable name is m underscore nm. And here, so we had the set. So we're using set float previously for saying the speed value, but because now we're setting the jump, which is a trigger, we have to specify set trigger. So you give it the name. So here it tells you kind of what the values it's expecting. So all it really wants, it's either the number, so the numerical ID for the parameter or the name of it. So the numerical ID would be if you came back here, and I believe it starts at index 0, so it'd be 0, 1, 2. So if you wanted to say index of 1, but it's much easier just to give it the name. So we're just going to say the name of it is, jump. So that should tie us to the trigger. And so the other part that we need to tie to is the grounded flag. And so where that gets set, if you look up here, this is where we do our check. So we start off seeing if grounded is false, and then if we see that's collided back with the ground, we set it to true. So this is the only place where we're modifying the grounded. I take that back, because we do modify it here. But this gets run on every update cycle. So this is probably the more appropriate place to put it. So if we say n, and because grounded is a Boolean value rather than a trigger, so we have to say set bool, and again, you give it the name, which we've called it grounded, and then whatever the value is, and we're just going to tie it directly to m grounded. Okay. So that should set the trigger and Boolean value. So now we can go back and we can kind of test this out and see if it works. So it's still compiling, and compiled, we can check. So see, I'm getting a bunch of warnings. I'll have to go back and look and see what's causing that. Let's just go ahead and run and see what happens here. So I'm going to open up the animator. So see, our values are set. So if I press the space bar, let's see what happens. So it does go to that transition. So the interesting part is that it just plays that just straight away, and then it goes back. So if I run it again, so I want to check the grounded. Let's see. So grounded equal to true. Oh, I wonder if I need to set a loop on the jump animation. So let's see. So here we have the jump animation. Here, normalize time speed. So there are settings. Fixed duration, offset. I have a fixed duration. So let's see if that ended up messing it up. Okay. So where? Let's see. So we look at our jump animation. So we want the loop. So it is set the loop. Interesting. So we come back to the animator. So it plays through, and then let's see. Don't quite know what's happening here.
Try jumping.
When you jump,
It hasn't been doing anything. Oh.
well, it's jumping. It's just that you can see the animation. It plays once and then immediately jumps back. So
maybe we can take off one of them? One of those arrows, or do we need both?
No, you need both because you need. Oh wait, if I didn't have this here, it would just stay. It would go to the jump animation and then just stay in the jump animation.
Should idle animation be grounded, like when we play if you're grounded?
So you could do that. So let's see. So if we set it up. So you set grounded. So when ground is equal to false, that's when we want to transition from idle to jump. And the difficult part about that, let's see how this works. There you go. So that seems to be
Oh,
working.
we got bigger.
Yeah, so it's a different animation. So excellent.
Huh.
Okay. Well, cool. So I said grounded. So in this case, and so the way the conditions work is that you can think of the conditions. If you add more than one, it reflects like an and statement. So in this case, it has to see the jump trigger and grounded being false before it plays. So the more those conditions you add on to it, then you can think of it just it's an additional and conditional that you're putting on there. So in this case, we have those two. And so right now, so this works great, but now we need to tie, say, move and jump together too, because we want it such that if you're running along, you want to jump.
Especially if gaps.
Yeah, so you want to show that. So again, so we kind of create our transitions, so we can transition from one to the other. Oops. Again, I'm just going to take out the duration and fixed time because those aren't necessary for our.
You still had that duration time fixed on that other move animation.
Okay.
You still had it like check mark, even though it's 0 for the other one.
Yeah, since it's 0, it shouldn't play. It shouldn't matter. Anyway, so if we go from move to jump, so in this case, it's we want to it's pretty much the same conditions as the idle. So if we're in the move, we want to know, are we on the ground and has the trigger been set? So in this case, we want to see that jump trigger and then grounded equal to false. And so if we're in the move, animation and these two become true, then we jump over to the jump animation. And we come to the jump animation. And so for jump, so if we're in jump, now we have to figure out when we're coming back down on the ground whether or not we're going back to, say, a move or back to the idle. So we look at kind of what we already have from jump to idle. So we just check to see if we're on the ground. And so that we know we definitely need that for the jump to move. And so really what we need to do is mimic kind of what we're doing from move to idle to then help make this determination to say, if I'm going to jump, should I go over here or should I go down here to idle? So it's tied to that speed. So for jump, so to go from jump to move, I want my speed to be greater than, say, 0.1. So in this case, now I know the character's still moving. So when I hit the ground, I want to go back to the move animation. And likewise here, we need to modify this, because if we're back on the ground and we're not moving, we want to go to the idle.
Okay.
So let's try it and see what happens. Alright, so we got the character. If I move the character to the left and to the right, you see the move animation playing. And then if I jump, so because I wasn't moved, so I was staying still, I went back to the idle. And then if I jump,
it worked.
You can see it goes back to the move.
Success!
Alright. Excellent. And so for those who are interested in doing kind of your own own animation, so we talked about like emoting or having something with the run or double jump. Really, you'd go into kind of modifying these parameters to do something. So, like for instance, I think I have an animation I was doing, this pulse animation. And so if we run it, oops, I'm going to select the character.
I think you added it.
It should be tied. Let's see. If I come back, let's see. If I come back to the pulse, and then put Woody in there. So you can. So the interesting part about the animations is that if the animation, if it fits the so really all we're doing with the animations is we're modifying components on objects. So if the object we put in here has the components that the animation is modifying, then we can play it. And so here, let's say I have my character, so it just does its pulsing. And just to show you, I could take.
Wait, what does it mean by pulsing?
I just changed the scale. But I could take another object. So say for instance, I take an object on the foreground and put it here. And I have just like this pulsing.
Yeah. Okay.
Tile. So, like I said, the animations are independent of the object. It's just, like I said, the animation, all it's doing is just modifying values within the game object. So as long as your game object has those components that the animation is trying to modify, you can use one animation across multiple objects. But what I want to do is set up just like kind of an emote where I press a button and you get the character to start pulsing. Something entertaining like that. So what I'll do is and create a state. Actually,
Well, what is that exit? Any state? What are those?
So this one actually, this is probably the way you want to do it. So for like an emote, so it may be that we want the character to emote regardless of what state you're in. So the character could be moving, jumping, idle, and we just want the character to start like waving or something like that. So even like they're midair, start waving in the middle of the air. So you can tie it to any state. So what this says is that no matter what state you're in, if this condition's met, it'll start playing that animation. So we can try that for, let's say, this kind of, just to give an example of how this might work. So we'll call this pulse, and we'll tie it to that pulsing animation. Whoops. And so, okay. And so, let's see. So for this one, I really just wanted to play it once and then stop.
25 seconds.
So it gives a fixed duration. Let's see. So here, whoops. Whoops.
Whoa, you have two things. You actually have two things selected. Not a good thing.
Yeah, and so I have to go back and fix the
Can you just hit Control Z?
The animation.
Until you fix it?
So here I'm just going to replace that with Woody. So now,
Let's see what, just maybe play the pulsing thing right there just to be safe. Oh.
you see that there, and then if I come back to the animator, so I can look at the pulse. Whoops, I want to look at the transition.
Whoa.
So you can let's say you can kind of modify. So if you want to see what it looked like without an exit time, so it looks a little weird. So here I want to make sure we play the end of it. Let's just set the offset. So now that plays it, and then if I go back and look at our animation, so I don't want to give it a loop, I just want it to play once. I think here it just loops it, and it just loops through. But I have to give it some way to transition. So in this case, I'm just going to have a trigger, and I'll call that trigger emote. And so if the emote trigger is pressed, then we should see the this play. And so I'm going to set this to emote. And so without coding this up, I just want to try it with the animator. So here.
Whoa. Whoops.
So it did. So I played it, but didn't kick it back out. So we have to transition back out of
How?
Of pulse. So here it goes back to. So either you can directly transition to
Pulse back to idle animation, I'm assuming?
or you could, yeah, so you could do it in, so you can transition to any of the states. So for instance, if I transition, say from pulse to idle, and then here, actually I set it up where it transitions to all three. Actually, I don't quite want to do that. So you can see what happens if I just set it to idle, or a transition to idle. And it immediately just starts playing the idle animation. But if I'm moving, then it just kind of forces me back into the.
So you're hitting pulse, but it won't go like back to idle animation. It won't like go back to that idle animation.
No, so you can do. It's probably the if you want to get this set up. You could do similar checks. So, for instance, from here I can see, is my speed less than 0.01, and if I am on the ground, and likewise here for in jump. This one, just say, this one maybe a little bit more challenging. So if we're in the air, don't want that to happen. And likewise for moving, for speed is greater than 0.1, and we're also on the ground. So that should set up kind of different, the different transitions. So if you try it out, so I pulse,
and it's stuck.
And I got stuck.
Lovely.
So let's see. So I think that's okay. Let's see. So I hit the pulse. So here, the grounded is set to true. Our speed is less than 0.1. So it should come here. Oh no, this is set to. So I just got stuck because it wasn't set properly. Whoops. Try that again. So at any rate, do that. If I move, whoops, get stuck in that. So anyway, I'll let you all play with this a bit. So if you want to try out, I say kind of different animations. I mean, really for the assignment, it's really just getting the idle, the move, and the jump all working together in order to get it done. So, but definitely, I said, just try some other animations. I said for the run and the double jump, you just have to figure out how to tie those inputs into the animator and get it to transition appropriately between the new animations and kind of what's established. So, all right, well that should wrap up assignment 3. So